walk 61 highway till I give down in my knees.
We're talking with Bill Ferris about his 1975 film, Give My Poor Heart Ease. And you made this film, Bill, about the blues in Mississippi at a time, in the 70s when there was a lot of backlash from white people in the South against the civil rights gains that had happened in the 1960s. So, you know, I I wonder, and I'm sure everybody who's going to watch this is wondering, how your upbringing as a white Mississippian shaped your determination to document blues culture and the black culture of Mississippi at the time.
I grew up on a farm outside of Vicksburg in Warren County, Mississippi, and we were the only white family there for several miles. And all my friends, as childhood friends, and my world was surrounded with black families and children my age. And I used to go to a little black church on the farm every first Sunday when they had a service with a lady named Mary Gordon. And I learned to sing the hymns and to love the sermons. And as I grew older, I realized there were no hymnals in that church, and that when those families were gone, the music would disappear. And so I decided to record the music and photograph it and later film it as a way of preserving that beautiful world that was my earliest experience with black music, and incredibly intimate and powerful. In a way, it was the foundation for my entire life as a folklorist. And then as I grew older, I was increasingly aware of social injustice, of civil rights. And when I was an undergraduate student at Davidson College, I was actively involved with desegregating the college, with participating and working with children in the area, teaching black children. And I felt an obligation and a commitment to somehow reach out and make a difference. And for me, from childhood on and teenage years on, recording and preserving music and voice, the stories of first the community on the farm where I grew up, and then later all over the Mississippi Delta and other areas. I saw it as a work of protest, where the voices of black families had been omitted from the books and the records historically that we were taught in school. I saw these voices and recording them as a political act, because without those recordings, the voices would be forgotten. And I've lived to see a day and today
Right.
when to see Jay-Z and Beyonce using my photography and film in films that Jay-Z is doing on Parchman Penitentiary, and Beyonce has licensed my photograph of Bobby Rush to use in her country production that she's just started. It's like good whiskey, it improves with time. So I feel like Give My Poor Heart Ease is the pinnacle of my work on blues. I saw film as the ultimate way of immersing an audience in the experience of a juke joint or a face-to-face conversation with a blues singer or a prison inmate at Parchman Penitentiary. that's virtually impossible to recreate. And there you have it face to face on the screen with the audience. And they are essentially able to put themselves in the shoes of people who are speaking.
Did you face skepticism from these communities and these people at all? And if so, like, how did you build trust?
Well, I think first of all, as a Mississippian, I spoke a language, a dialect, and I knew the state's places. I could talk about towns. And in the 60s, if I knocked on a black door, that was not a safe thing to be doing. And they implicitly assumed that I was, you know, trying to do good work. But they always questioned me as to what I wanted to do. When I went the first time I knocked on the door of James' son Ford Thomas, the blues singer I worked with for many years, his wife came to the door and she said, "What do you want?" And I said, "I'm looking for James Thomas." She said, "He doesn't live here." Uh, and I said, "Well, I'm sorry." I turned around to walk away and she said, "What do you want with him?" And I said, "I'm working on a book on the blues and I want to put him in it." And she said, "Well, he'll be back in about a half hour. Sit down there in that chair." So I sat down and his children immediately came up and held my hand and asked me what I was doing. But there was always wariness. But once people understood that you were there to tell their story, they wanted their story told. And often people would say, "Now, if I tell you about this, do you promise to put it out so the world will know how they've treated us here?" And I said, "I promise." And this book or film, whatever the product, will be my way of telling the world about your life in a true and clear way. And that was a bond that I've tried to keep. And I think it's worked.
Did you feel any tension between your role as a folklorist and your role just as a Mississippian and a storyteller?
Yale was in a process of transition. It was creating the first African American studies program in the nation. I was part of the team that taught the first team taught course on Afro American studies with Willie Ruff, a jazz musician, Larry Neal, a black poet in Harlem, uh, part of the Black Arts movement, and Robert Ferris Thompson, a black art historian. The four of us taught that. So this was radical that Black studies was on the books as a curriculum. We brought in B.B. King to perform and speak, and James Thomas. We filmed in Harlem, in New Haven, and then I took a crew to the Mississippi Delta for a week. And that was powerful, radical material. We got an honorary doctorate of humane letters at Yale, awarded to B.B. King. So these were sort of foundational steps that shook the foundations of the traditional academic world. These were people who had very little academic training, if any, but they could play the guitar, they could tell the stories, and the students adored them. So it was a very important period. And the films were produced during that time. We were blending into this extraordinarily important university curriculum the new worlds of Black studies and film as equal partners to the more classic traditions that had always been at home there.
I can't imagine though that getting access to do interviewing, to interview people, to interview incarcerated men inside Parchman, which is a notorious, penitentiary. How did you gain access to Parchman, and what sort of ethical considerations, kind of guided your portrayal of the stories you filmed of those men?
Well, I always knocked at the door of homes and at Parchman. I didn't expect to be allowed in the 60s or in the 70s. But I said, I'm developing a book, now a film, on music. And Parchman was especially important as the location where John and Alan Lomax recorded work chants and blues decades earlier. And I said, I'm here to record work chants and to do interviews. And the warden there seemed pleased with the idea. I mean, it was a non-threatening kind of request, and the inmates were all too happy to talk. And we spoke with them in private, in rooms where it was simply us and them, in very moving conversation about their lives, their experience. And the whole thing was totally unscripted. No one could have anticipated the people we met and the power. They poured their heart and soul out in front of the camera. And it was, we just felt every moment was a priceless kind of document that we were able to carry back and share in the film itself.
The things I've always found myself struggling with in my own work is, you know, so many of the tensions we feel in the South that have been so exacerbated for so long, so much of that has to do with um, white people not understanding, you know, what, our black brothers and sisters have gone through in this nation and in the South in particular. But and that if we make the effort to go and learn that and get in touch with it, and not just learn it in an academic way, but to feel it, lots of things open up, including new attitudes.
Of Fannie Lou Hamer, who said, if you want to keep me down in the ditch, I'm going to grab your foot and pull you in with me. Instead of trying to be working against other groups, if we work with them, particularly black and white, you're using your full power of creative and political and energy. And you can see that in the studios at Muscle Shoals and at Stax Records and at Sun Records, where music was being produced with black and white musicians like the Memphis Horns. And when Aretha came down to record at Muscle Shoals, she said, where's that backup group? Thinking they were black. And they said, well, they're sitting right here. And you have this kind of blending of power that is unparalleled. And slowly but surely, our nation has been moving toward that dream, Martin Luther King's dream. And as it's been said, we're halfway home and a long way to go. That's the dream of our republic, of democracy, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for all people. And we have moved slowly but surely in the right direction. And I think uh, as a folklorist, that's been the kind of subtext of everything that I've done. You unveil the power and beauty of music and of stories and art that come from the heart of people who've suffered so much and continue to struggle in ways that are unimaginable to white citizens, myself included. But we have to try to build those bridges across troubled waters. And the arts and the classroom are where we have the young future leaders, and we want to prepare them to think about the blues in the same way they think about Beethoven, and to think about the stories as just as important as the written word. And uh, all of this is it's like freedom, it's like liberation, to open the minds and hearts to a partnership with people that are different from you and learn to walk in their footsteps.
Well, what you just said to me it makes me think of a particular scene in Give My Poor Hearties, where we see B.B. King playing in a theater at Yale, where I understand he was the first non-classical musician ever to play on that stage. And as he's playing, there's a voiceover of him, and he says, "This is another thing that makes the blues singer and the blues musician continue to go on, because this is his way of crying out to people." And I'm not sure BB himself would have used the word oppression 50 years ago, but do you think what he was talking about was his community crying out against the centuries of oppression that they had suffered?
I do. I mean, I think musicians like B.B. King embedded in their music, and it's embedded in soul music and in hip hop and rap. Uh, the struggles that each generation has faced uh, are done and articulated in music uh, with the hope that a better day is coming, as Sam Cooke said. And that is so powerful. And it's a fundamental. BB, who had no formal education, was a lecturer and an honorary doctorate degree recipient at one of the greatest universities in the world. And when I asked him if the students wanted him, when they heard he was getting the degree, if he'd be the commencement speaker. And he said, "Well, Bill, I'm not educated. I can't give a lecture." And the student said, "Just bring Lucille." And so he brought Lucille, his guitar, and performed, and it was the most moving, memorable graduation commencement presentation ever. And this is what we're talking about. And the students adored him in Sprague Hall, the great music venue at Yale. There was standing room only for his presentation there. It was so powerful, and it was a moment that all of us, faculty and students, will never forget.
In the 50 years since you finished Give My Poor Hearties, has your understanding of the themes of that music, of that movie, and the messages in that movie, have they changed at all over 50 years? Like when you look back at it now versus.
Well, Every time I watch that film, I love it. It's not as though I feel like, well, I've watched this before. I'm going to have to watch it. I want to watch it because it's like these are people you love, and you notice little details, how someone takes a deep breath or scratches their head or glances to the side as they're talking. And you realize that film captures all of this information, and you can watch it 100 times, and I probably have watched it 100 times, and you still see something that you never noticed and thought about before. And it leaves you with a very good feeling, a satisfaction of having been with these amazing people in such powerful places, from the Mississippi Delta to Yale University. And there's something really heartening that the blues is welcome in both of those worlds.
Looking at all the footage and Give My Poor Heart Ease of, the people and places along Beale Street in Memphis. And Beale Street, has had a complete makeover and since you did that. And so this footage you have of Beale Street before that revival, that remaking of the place, it's now a historical artifact, right? So, how does preserving, you know, vanishing cultural landscapes, inform your work as a folklorist?
Well, they should think about following their heart and listening and documenting, filming the things that touch them most deeply. For me, that was always the blues. And knowing that if you do that work well, keep it in focus, get good, clean sound, and capture the performance, the story, you will, without even knowing it, capture the context, the room in which, or the performing arts center in which it's happening, the road or street outside. You capture what I call the sense of place, be it a little shotgun house in the Mississippi Delta or Sprague Music Hall at Yale. This is jarringly different in terms of affluence, but you have one little modest room that inspired a music that at some point is on the stage of this great music venue at Yale. And a couple of years ago, we were on the stage at Lincoln Center with 4 concerts of musicians. The pinnacle, the highest level of recognition of music in New York now is very comfortable with blues as well as classical and jazz.
Well, that sort of leads me to my last question for you, which is, if you were 33 again and you were filming in today's digital age, is there anything that you would do differently? Or are there certain, or does it just make you think about principles that ought to remain timeless?
When I started my work, I was working alone. I had a reel to reel analog tape recorder, a Super 8 camera, and 200-watt bulbs that I would clip on walls at night. And that worked fine. In many ways, that was the best filming I ever did. It's been used over and over by filmmakers as sort of a clip, like the Summer of Soul used some of my gospel footage that was Super 8. It's sort of a timeless piece of recorded and filmed music, blues and sacred. So I think what it does is it liberates you in the sense that you don't have to spend, the money that for me I didn't have, but with grants I eventually was able to get uh, better equipment. But we have that now. Technology has made every man a potential filmmaker and documenter of his or her world. And so I tell my students, you have no excuse, and start with your grandparents and parents. Record their memories. So for your grandchildren, you'll have a treasure to pass along to them. And we often neglect those worlds that are our own, thinking that they couldn't be as important as someone down the street. But it's opened doors that are dramatically more accessible now. And I'm all for technology and for the things. The iPhone with every new generation improves the camera, and that's a very, for a folklorist, they're really thinking of our métier, making it easier and more effective to do what we do. We are the stories we tell. And if you talk to your grandparents or to a blues singer about the stories that they remember, that frames their life and their music in ways. It offers a context, a backdrop for The Thrill Is Gone, that classic music and vocal of B.B. King. Uh, the thrill is gone when you think about his life and how he struggled as a musician, a tractor driver in the Mississippi Delta, to become an iconic voice for music and for American culture. Uh, the thrill was gone, but he certainly nurtured it over the years, not just for himself, but for everyone that was privileged to hear his music.
Bill Ferris, I always love talking to you. Thank you for being so generous with your time, and I look forward to our next conversation.
I do too, Chuck. Thank you so much.